The ballroom slept under a canopy of moonlight. Chandeliers dangled above like frozen constellations, their crystals glinting faintly against the waxed marble floor. Every sound felt too loud in the emptiness. The squeak of a mop, the slow drag of water across stone, the distant hum of an air vent. Daniel moved through it all with quiet rhythm, as if the silence itself had given him a job. His gray uniform hung loose at the shoulders. The name tag faded to a ghost of letters. Each stroke of the mop was measured, steady, not from duty, but from habit. He'd been here so long, the floors almost recognized him. At the far end of the room, half hidden behind gold curtains, stood an old grand piano. The black lacquer had dulled with time, its edges chipped, keys yellowed like the pages of an old book. Every night Daniel glanced at it the way a starving man looks at bread, afraid to reach, afraid to be seen reaching. He set the mop aside, checked the hallway, empty. Then softly he lifted the piano lid. The hinges sighed like a secret exhaled. His fingers hovered over the keys, calloused and cracked from bleach water. But gentle, reverent. A single note drifted into the room. Then another. Then a melody, fragile, hesitant, yet beautiful in its restraint. The sound wrapped around. The marble columns climbed the chandeliers and filled the empty ballroom with something sacred. For a moment, Daniel wasn't a janitor. He was a man remembering who he used to be. Narration. Some people pray with words, the voice inside him murmured. Others, with music. He played until the clock above the bar ticked past midnight. The melody lingered, trembling in the still air, refusing to die. Then, a faint sound. A floorboard creaked behind the velvet curtain. Daniel froze, mid-note. The echo dissolved into silence, and someone unseen kept listening. The final note echoes, and someone unseen is listening. Daniel stayed perfectly still, eyes locked on the curtain. Nothing moved, no footsteps, no whisper, only silence, thick enough to feel. He exhaled, half a laugh, half a sigh. "Ghosts got better taste than people," he muttered. The next morning, fluorescent light replaced moonlight. The ballroom looked smaller by day, less magical, more work. The mop bucket squeaked as Daniel pushed it along, trying to pretend the music hadn't happened. "Still playing Beethoven for the dust, Danny?" called Carl, another janitor, tossing a rag over his shoulder. Daniel smirked faintly. "Dust listens better than most." Carl chuckled. "Man, you're weird. You think that fancy piano gonna take you somewhere?" Daniel shrugged. "It already does." Carl snorted and walked off, mumbling something about dreams that don't pay bills. Daniel's hands lingered on the piano cover as he passed. He could still feel the warmth of the keys from the night before, or maybe it was just the memory. Narration. Once, those hands had been trained, polished, applauded. Now they scrubbed grime off banisters, yet when they touched music, they remembered. The old language, the pulse, the purpose. He straightened his name tag, turned to leave, and caught his reflection in the grand mirror. For a second, he almost didn't recognize himself. "Music's the only thing that still listens back," he whispered. And somewhere beyond the ballroom doors, unseen, someone was listening. Daniel whispers, "Music's the only thing that still listens back." That night, when the halls emptied and the ballroom lights dimmed again, Daniel sat at the piano with the gentleness of a man greeting an old friend. He ran his thumb over the middle C, chipped, slightly off pitch, and smiled. He began to play the same melody as before, but slower this time. Each note lingered longer, wrapped in the ache of memory. Narration. There were songs that belonged to the world, and then there were songs that belonged to one heart. This one belonged to hers. A soft giggle echoed in his head. The ballroom blurred. In its place bloomed a small living room filled with afternoon sun and the scent of crayons. A little girl, Lily, no older than 7, sat beside him on a worn piano bench. Her fingers clumsily mimicked his, missing keys but finding joy. "Daddy, I want to play it faster," she'd squealed. He'd laughed. "Music isn't a race, sweetheart. It's a heartbeat." "But mine beats fast," she'd replied, pounding a few joyful, chaotic notes. The flash of her smile melted into laughter, then static, then silence. The scene collapsed back into the cold ballroom. Daniel's eyes glistened. His fingers trembled over the final chord. Narration. Time hadn't stolen her song. Only the world had stopped listening. He pressed one last note. It rang faintly against the marble, fighting to exist a little longer before fading completely. The light above flickered, once, twice, and then steadied. He closed the piano lid gently, whispering, "Good night, Lily." Behind him, the echo of her laughter still seemed to linger, until it was swallowed by the hum of the fluorescent lights. Lily's laughter fades into silence, replaced by the hum of fluorescent lights. The next morning, the hotel shimmered with chaos disguised as luxury. Polished shoes clicked across the marble floors. Vases of imported lilies lined the entrance, and the scent of fresh polish mixed with perfume. Management whispered orders like prayers before a storm. A black limousine pulled up beneath the awning. From it emerged Evelyn Carter, poised, immaculate, and expressionless. The billionaire widow of tech magnate Marcus Carter. She wore grief-like armor, expensive, cold, and heavy. "Mrs. Carter, welcome back to the Imperial," said the manager, forcing a smile too wide. "Everything's ready for your gala." "I don't want noise," Evelyn replied. Her voice was smooth but sharp. "No interruptions, no mistakes." As she strode past, Daniel stood by the far wall, mop in hand. He bowed his head slightly, but her reflection caught in the marble. Two worlds overlapping for only a second. She didn't notice him. Not really. Throughout the day, Daniel watched her entourage sweep through the halls, inspecting every chandelier and curtain as if chasing perfection would bury loss. Narration. Some guests brought luggage. Others brought ghosts. That night, when the hotel finally quieted, Daniel returned to the ballroom. The same familiar piano waited, patient as ever. He brushed the keys, and the song began, Lily's song, soft, mournful, filled with longing. Upstairs, in her penthouse suite, Evelyn paused mid-step. The melody drifted through the vents, faint yet piercing, threading straight through her walls of composure. Her breath caught. Narration. She hadn't heard that tune in years. Not since her son. Her hand trembled around the glass she was holding. It slipped, shattering against the floor. Evelyn froze, listening. The music below carried on. From her suite, she hears faint piano music and freezes. The clock struck midnight again. The ballroom slept, lit only by the soft amber glow of a chandelier left half dim. Daniel returned, as he always did, after the world's noise had died down. His mop leaned against the wall, forgotten. Tonight his fingers craved the keys more than rest. He sat, closed his eyes, and began to play. The same melody, but slower, deeper. Notes fell like raindrops on glass. Behind the far curtain, shadows shifted. Evelyn Carter stood in her silk night robe, bare feet silent on the cold marble. She shouldn't have been there, yet something, that song, had pulled her like a magnet through the dark. Her breathing hitched as she drew closer. Each chord sliced gently through the air, echoing memories she'd locked away. Her son sitting at the piano, hair messy, smiling. "Mom," he'd said, "someday you'll hear this and know I'm okay." Now hearing it again, from a stranger's hands, felt like time folding in on itself. Evelyn stepped closer, the curtain brushing her wrist. Daniel's face, lit by the dim chandelier, showed a serenity she hadn't seen in years. A man poor in money, but rich in peace. Narration. The world above him sparkled with glass and gold. But he played like a man who had already touched heaven. Her eyes filled. A single tear slipped free, trailing down her cheek. She pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. Daniel paused mid-song, sensing something, a change in the air. Change. He turned slightly, frowning toward the curtain. Evelyn froze. The room fell silent, both of them suspended in a moment. Neither could explain. A tear rolls down her cheek, unseen by Daniel. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The piano key Daniel had last pressed still quivered in the air, its echo fading into nothing. He squinted toward the heavy velvet curtain. "Hello?" His voice carried, soft but uneasy. No answer. Only the slow tick of the ballroom clock. He rose from the bench, wiping his palms on his uniform. The chandelier hummed faintly, its crystals trembling as if nervous too. He stepped closer, one cautious foot after another. A shadow flickered behind the fabric. Daniel froze again. "Who's there?" The air thickened, heavy, expectant. Then, before he could touch the curtain, the elevator bell chimed down the hall. A gust of air followed, the door closing somewhere above. Whoever had been there was gone. He hesitated, staring at the rippling fabric. Something sparkled faintly on the marble near the piano leg, small, gleaming, delicate. He crouched, picking it up between rough fingers. A diamond earring. Way too expensive for anyone who worked there. Narration. The rich left traces the way the poor left sweat. Daniel turned the jewel over in his hand. It caught the dim light, scattering it like tiny stars. For a moment he felt out of place, just holding it. He placed it carefully on the piano bench and exhaled. "Guess the ghost's rich," he muttered. The next sound wasn't a ghost. It was shoes. Sharp, clicking. The hotel manager, appearing in the doorway with a frown deep enough to crush sympathy. "Daniel," he snapped. "You're still here? I told you. No one touches the instruments." Daniel straightened. "Sir, I was just... Enough. One more stunt like this and you're out. Understood?" The chandelier light caught on the diamond between them, glinting like a warning. The manager finds him near the piano and warns, "Touch that again, you're fired." By morning, whispers floated through the staff hallways like spilled perfume. "Did you hear?" one maid whispered, pushing a cart. "The janitor got caught sneaking around the ballroom again." "Yeah," another added, grinning. "He was playing piano for some guest. Romantic, huh?" Their laughter was quick, sharp, the kind that cuts without needing a knife. Daniel walked past them carrying a mop bucket, pretending not to hear. But words have a way of finding ears that don't want them. At the supply room, Carl leaned against the door frame, arms folded. "Man, they say you were serenading some rich lady last night." Daniel forced a chuckle. "They say a lot of things." Carl smirked. "Be careful. Management doesn't like stories like that. Makes 'em nervous." Daniel kept his tone calm, but inside his stomach knotted. He hadn't meant harm. Hadn't even known anyone was listening. Music was all he had left that didn't require permission. Hours later, the manager called him in. "Your hours are being reduced," the man said curtly, not even looking up from his clipboard. "Reduced? Why?" "Let's just say we don't pay people to play piano at midnight." "I was on my break," Daniel replied quietly. "And I was remembering someone." The manager's eyes flicked up, cold. "Remember on your own time." Daniel nodded, jaw tight, and stepped out. Narration. Pride doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just walks away before it breaks. That night, he sat in the janitor's closet, knees pulled to his chest, the hum of the fluorescent light above him steady and cruel. Softly, almost as if apologizing to the air, he hummed Lily's song. Each note cracked halfway out, but he kept going. Tears slid down his face, unseen. Alone in the janitor's closet, he hums Lily's tune through tears. In the penthouse above the ballroom, Evelyn Carter sat by the window as dawn poured in like liquid gold. The city below woke noisily. Car horns, distant chatter, delivery trucks. But her mind stayed fixed on that melody from the night before. It wasn't just music. It was memory. The same sequence her late son had written in his final months. Something he called light beneath dust. She pressed her fingers to her temples, then picked up the phone. "George," she said to her assistant, "find out who's on the night shift here. Maintenance, janitorial, everyone." George hesitated. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" "No," she replied, her tone softer than usual. "A question." Within an hour, a slim file appeared on her breakfast tray. Evelyn flipped it open between untouched bites of fruit. There it was. Name, Daniel Ross. Position, night janitor background, former music student, Westbridge Conservatory. Dropped out 15 years ago. She froze at the attached note. Left school following daughter's death. No recent family listed. Evelyn traced her finger over the page, the words blurring as tears welled. "A man who cleans floors," she whispered, "once touched the same world as my son." Grief recognizes itself, even through strangers. That night, when the ballroom emptied again, she stood in her sweet doorway listening for the melody. The silence felt heavier now, demanding to be filled. She turned to her reflection. Perfect posture, perfect hair, eyes tired beyond wealth. "He played like he knew my son," she said quietly. Maybe he did. Below, a lone light flicked on near the piano. Daniel's shadow moved softly across the marble. Evelyn watched from above, not as a billionaire, but as a mother. Evelyn whispers, "He played like he knew my son." The ballroom gleamed under dim evening lights. Tables were set for the next day's gala, silverware aligned with surgical precision. But when the last staff member left, Daniel slipped quietly through the service door, mop in one hand, piano keys in his mind. He crossed the floor, drawn to the same old grand piano, as if it called his name. But something was different tonight. A folded note sat on the piano bench. Beneath it, a small velvet pouch. He frowned, glancing around. The room was empty, still. Even the air seemed to wait. Daniel opened the note carefully, reading the neat, graceful handwriting. "For the song that healed me." Inside the pouch were brand new piano strings, shining softly like silver veins under the light. He blinked, stunned. Who would? His voice cracked halfway through. No one had ever thanked him for playing. No one had even listened, until now. Kindness from the unseen is the purest form of grace. He replaced the old broken string himself, careful, reverent. His hands moved with the memory of his younger self, the musician, not the janitor. When he sat down and began to play, the piano responded differently, fuller, warmer. The song carried deeper this time, as if the instrument too wanted to speak. Upstairs, Evelyn stood in the hallway, barefoot, clutching the rail as the melody reached her again. But now she didn't hide behind a curtain. She leaned against the wall, eyes glistening, every note undoing her composure. Daniel played, unaware that someone was crying behind the shadows, not from pity, but from recognition. The music grew softer. One final note lingered. Evelyn pressed her hand to her chest, whispering, "Thank you." He plays again, and this time, she stands behind the curtain, openly weeping. The final note faded like breath on glass. Daniel turned slowly, sensing it, that quiet weight of another's presence. Evelyn stepped out from behind the curtain. No guards, no jewelry this time, thought just her, bare, trembling, human. Daniel straightened. "Ma'am, I didn't mean to disturb." "You didn't." Her voice wavered, fragile as the echo between them. "You played a song I thought I'd never hear again." Daniel blinked, confused. "It's just something my daughter loved. She used to—" She cut in, tears softening her tone. "My son wrote it." The air froze. He stared at her, every thought slipping out of reach. "Your son?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "Before he died, he called it Light Beneath Dust." Daniel's hand drifted to the keys. Lily used to hum it when she was scared of storms. Said it sounded like light trying to find its way home. For a moment they both stood there, Two strangers linked by a melody neither could finish without breaking. Grief speaks the same language. It doesn't need names, only echoes. Evelyn stepped closer. When I heard you play, it felt like he was still here. Daniel swallowed hard. When I play, it's the only time she still is. Silence again, but this time not empty. Full, heavy, holy. Evelyn's eyes shimmered in the low light. Then maybe, she whispered, they found each other. Daniel's voice was barely a breath. Maybe they're both listening. Outside, the night wind pushed gently against the windows, carrying the sound of a city unaware of the miracle happening in its quietest room. Then maybe, Daniel says softly, they're both listening. By morning, the hotel buzzed with energy again. But now, whispers carried heavier than footsteps. Two servers leaned near the catering table. You heard about Mrs. Carter? That janitor's been sneaking around with her at night. Seriously? The other laughed. Guess music really does open doors. Their snickers echoed through the hall, small but cruel. Daniel walked by with his mop bucket, pretending not to notice, though every word stung sharper than bleach. Later that afternoon, the ballroom doors burst open. A young waiter, phone in hand, waved the screen at his co-workers. Look, someone took a photo last night. On the screen, Daniel and Evelyn, faintly lit by the chandelier's glow, standing near the piano. Her face turned toward him, soft, emotional. The caption read, Hotel Janitor Serenades Billionaire Widow. Within hours, gossip spread from the lobby to the penthouse. The manager called Daniel in. Do you realize what kind of mess this creates? The board is furious. Daniel's chest tightened. It's not what they think. She heard the music. The man slammed the file shut. Doesn't matter. You embarrassed the hotel. So that's it? Daniel asked quietly. That's it. Effective immediately, you're suspended. Outside the office, Evelyn overheard the entire conversation. The accusation, the dismissal, the silence that followed. Truth always travels slower than rumors. It limps while lies run. Daniel stood in the lobby, clutching his cleaning rag like it mattered, as security approached. His face was calm, not angry, just tired. He didn't look at Evelyn when they passed, but she looked at him, and her eyes said what her voice couldn't. I'm sorry. Evelyn watches as security escorts Daniel out. The grand suite felt colder that night. The city outside blinked with lights, but inside, everything was still. Too still. Evelyn sat before her piano, untouched since her son's funeral. The keys glimmered under the soft glow of a single lamp. She stared at them for a long time, as if they might accuse her for what she'd let happen downstairs. Her reflection stared back from the glossy surface. Flawless makeup, flawless posture, empty eyes. She lifted her trembling hands and pressed a key. The sound came out brittle, like it had forgotten how to be beautiful. Then another key, then another. But when she reached the familiar notes, the ones Daniel had played, something inside her cracked open. Grief, long buried, does not die. It waits, patient as dust, until the right sound finds it again. Tears blurred her vision. She played the melody faster, harder, almost punishing the instrument. But the song resisted anger. It was too gentle, too forgiving. The room swam. Memories poured through her. Her son's laughter, his fingers on the same keys, his promise that music would outlive him. Her hands slipped from the piano, collapsing into her lap. The first sob came out soundless, followed by another, and then another, raw, human, unguarded. She whispered through tears, I judged him like the world judged me. Her breathing slowed. For the first time in years, she didn't feel rich or powerful or alone, only broken, but finally real. She looked toward the window, where the ballroom lights glowed faintly below. Narration. Sometimes, redemption begins not with forgiveness, but with the courage to admit we were wrong. She wiped her face, stood shakily and whispered, I'm going to find him. She decides to find him, to make it right. Rain fell softly outside Evelyn's mansion as she sat by her writing desk, a candle flickering beside her. The storm made the windows hum faintly, the same low tone that once filled her son's music room. Before her lay fine stationery, untouched for years. She dipped the pen into ink, her hand trembling but determined. When words can't reach the living, sometimes they must travel through paper, to heal the unseen. She began to write. Mr. Ross, you don't know me, not truly. But last night, you played a song I've carried in silence for years. My son wrote it before he died, his final piece. He told me it was for those who are never seen. When I heard you play, I realized he had written it for men like you. Her pen paused as tears fell onto the page. The ink bled slightly, turning words into faint blurs. I once believed money made people valuable. You reminded me that it's love that does. My son wanted to build a foundation to give music to the forgotten. I'd like to finish that dream, if you'll help me. She signed her name, Evelyn Carter, and sealed the envelope with trembling fingers. In the quiet afterward, she imagined her son smiling. For the first time, the ache of grief shifted. Not gone, but gentler. The next morning, Daniel found the envelope on the steps outside his small apartment, his name written in elegant cursive. For the one who played in the dark. He tore it open slowly, each line pulling him deeper into disbelief and emotion. When he reached the final words, his hands shook. He whispered, voice breaking, Lily. She'd love this. Daniel reads it with trembling hands, whispering Lily's name. The next evening, Daniel returned to the hotel, not as an employee, but as a man summoned by something greater than duty. His worn shoes clicked nervously against the marble as he entered the quiet lobby. At the front desk, a young receptionist straightened. Mr. Ross? He nodded cautiously. She handed him an envelope. White, embossed with gold. Carter Foundation. Inside, a letter printed on crisp parchment. You are invited to perform at a private memorial concert in honor of Michael Carter. The theme, for those who play in silence. Below the text, Evelyn's signature glimmered in ink, along with a note in her own handwriting. Your song deserves to be heard by those who never were. Daniel's throat tightened. He traced the words slowly, as if afraid they might disappear. Some invitations open doors, others open wounds, the kind that must bleed before they heal. He folded the letter gently and looked toward the ballroom doors. The same chandelier gleamed above, the same piano waited beneath it. But tonight, they looked different, like old friends waiting for an overdue apology. The hotel staff watched from a distance, murmuring in surprise. The janitor who'd once been escorted out now walked with quiet confidence. Evelyn stepped forward from the far side of the room, dressed in black yet radiant under the light. She offered a faint smile. Mr. Ross, she said softly, I hope you'll say yes. Daniel met her gaze, humility meeting grace. I don't know if I can. You already did, she replied. He turned toward the piano, fingers brushing the edge. The soundless promise of music filled the air again. Daniel stares at the piano, torn between fear and grace. The hall shimmered with candlelight. Rows of guests in black sat hushed beneath a vaulted ceiling, their eyes drawn to the single piano center stage. No spotlight, no orchestra, just one man and his music. Daniel stepped out from behind the curtain, still wearing his janitor uniform. Gasps rippled through the audience. A few whispers, a few frowns. But Evelyn, seated in the front row, gave a small nod of courage that steadied him. He sat at the piano, fingers trembling above the keys. For a long moment he simply breathed. There are moments when a man doesn't perform to be seen. He performs to survive. The first note broke the silence like sunlight through fog. Then another, then a cascade. The melody rose and fell, carrying everything he'd ever lost and everything he still loved. Each chord spoke for the people who cleaned after others left, for those who dreamed quietly between shifts, for Lily, for her laughter, for the promise she never got to keep. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as the song reached its heart. She could almost see her son sitting beside Daniel, hands moving in harmony across the same keys. As the final verse swelled, Daniel whispered under his breath, "This is for you, baby girl." The notes soared upward, shimmering in the candlelight, then faded, leaving a silence too powerful to fill. No one moved. No one breathed. Then slowly the audience rose. Applause thundered through the hall like rain on marble. Daniel didn't bow. He just looked up, eyes glistening, and smiled softly, as if someone above had heard. Sometimes music doesn't end. It just changes rooms. Standing ovation. But Daniel only smiles upward. Weeks later, the sound of laughter replaced silence at the Carter Foundation's new music wing. Children filled the practice room. Some shy, some curious, all holding instruments slightly too big for their hands. At the piano sat Daniel, posture straight, eyes kind. His janitor uniform was gone. In its place, a simple button-up shirt. Sleeves rolled, calloused fingers ready to guide. "Music isn't about being perfect," he told them, smiling. "It's about feeling something you can't say any other way." The kids nodded, eager, their small fingers striking uneven notes that somehow sounded right together. Once Daniel played to survive the quiet. Now he played so others could fill it. Through the tall windows, sunlight spilled across the polished piano. The same one from the ballroom, now restored. Above it hung a bronze plaque. "For those who play in silence." In honor of Lily and Michael. Evelyn stood in the doorway watching him teach. No words passed between them. None were needed. Her eyes glistened, not from grief this time, but from peace. Daniel noticed her and nodded once, a soft gratitude in the gesture. After the class ended, he stayed behind. The room emptied, leaving only him and the piano. He sat alone, pressing one quiet key, the opening note of the song that had changed 2 lives. The world would never know his name, but somewhere, in the hearts of those children, his song had already found a home. As the final chord echoed through the empty hall, Daniel whispered, "Good night, Lily." The sound lingered, warm and eternal, refusing to fade. The world may forget the janitor, but not his song.